you guys, welcome on back. Thank you for tuning in. As always, we are diving into the... Did you find it? No? What? Come here. Hi, baby. Hi, handsomes. You want to say hi? Hi to your audience? Today, like I said, we are diving into the new 2025 movie Together. Now, this was a really interesting movie. I think this is the first time I've ever seen something like this portrayed, and the fact that it goes through the route, I guess, of horror is just perfect. It's perfect. Because I think it's true. It is kind of like a horrific situation. And I think the aspect of our two main characters or actors, Dave Franco and Alison Brie, actually being married, it works on so many levels, and I feel like it would be such a interesting project to do with your partner. I feel like it would bring up a lot of really interesting questions, and I wonder if maybe they felt some of this, But yeah, I have synopsis, my little notes rundown, and then I have a bunch of notes from the actual movie too. And there's quite a bit here. I don't know if we'll get into all of the nitty gritty of it, but this movie is just so fascinating. I think it's really deep and has a lot of rich context to it that you can sink your teeth into. Plus, just the way it portrays the body horror of this couple's codependency is so intriguing and I would say highly original as well. But yeah, I don't want to waste any time, guys. Let's dive on into this. It's honestly such a interesting movie. I highly recommend checking it out. So directed and written by Michael Shanks, produced by Dave Franco and Alison Brie, distributed by Neon Productions. Box office, it brought in about $32.3 million. I don't really know what the budget for it was. Probably a decent amount. They had to build that whole church set, so... Years into their relationship, Tim and Millie find themselves at a crossroads as they move to the country with tensions already flaring. An encounter with an unnatural force threatens to corrupt their lives, their love, and their flesh. I love how it feels maybe somewhat sort of biblical or cult-like, and it is, but it also diverges from that, and I just appreciate that. Starring Dave Franco as Tim and Alison Brie as Millie. And then there's also Damon Harriman as Jamie. I'm excited to get into this. You guys, it's such a mind fuck. If you're really into body horror and psychological horror, highly recommend this movie. So we open overlooking a trail with people calling out for someone named Simon and Carrie, and later we see their missing poster. We see an opening in the ground with a bell. It looks like an underground kind of cathedral, there's pews even, and some of the search dogs wander into it and drink from this mysterious hole filled with water in the cave. And I don't know how to describe this cave. It's dark, it's damp. This hole is just a gaping hole kind of tucked into the cave, and we'll get to it, but I asked myself a lot of times what does this cave represent? And I think it kind of represents ourselves. We'll get into it. One of the men searching earlier whistles for his dogs and sees them acting really odd. They're standing still, facing directly at each other. And even when they get home, they just stare at each other, and it sounds like their breathing almost syncs up too. Later that night, we hear the dogs whimpering outside, and the guy's daughter, she's calling Dad, Daddy, something's happening, blah blah blah. And he runs out there and goes into their shelter area, and you just get a very quick flash of it, but oh my god. It feels almost like it might be too much to show right off the bat, but I feel like it also sets a good hook in you. This is going to be some fucked shit. And you hear like the dogs whimpering, and the whines almost sound weirdly human too. I don't know if that was like a choice, but it sounds like a person. In the quick flash of the flashlight, you see the dogs morphing together into like some horrific Cronenberg style thing. And we cut to Dave Franco's character, Tim, going through old records and photographs as music plays like really loudly in the background. Already you're getting like this kind of disconnected vibe from Tim. Like he's not, our very first shot of him, he isn't socializing with everyone at the party. And as he's looking at a photo of his parents and him, his wife comes in and says they won't see anyone for a while. It's a going away party, so get your ass out there. And I also thought it was funny, we're already getting like signals to how in sync kind of they are as a couple. Millie matches about how everyone's talking about how we match. Sorry. And like, yeah, they're in nearly identical outfits, just like Millie's in the girl version. You know, she has a dress on instead of pants. And we see later like private conversations between Millie and her friends and Tim and his friends. I do find it interesting that Tim and his friends are outside and it's just a few of them, and then everyone inside seems to be like associated with Millie. And her friends check in with her saying Tim hasn't been himself lately. And that's where we find out that they haven't been having sex. So there's a lull, you know, in the physical romance department, intimacy department. His friends tell him to get back on a label to work, but he seems reluctant to, like he just wants to do it all himself. I find that interesting because then he's very quick to jump on being handed an opportunity by one of his friends. So it doesn't seem like he wants to do it himself. It seems like he just doesn't want to do it. And Tim even talks to Millie's own brother. So again, even one less person that's kind of technically in Tim's corner, and says she has made him lamer. And I did find it interesting that he promises to do the guitar like gig for them as they do shows in New York without even talking to her at all. Especially since we find out Tim doesn't drive, he doesn't have a car, so like everything is pushed onto Millie. As they go inside, they're kind of giving like a little thank you, goodbye speech, each of them. I would say Tim's very awkward. And in their dialogue, we get a lot of really interesting kind of looks into how each one's subconscious, I guess, goes through all these different issues that their characters face, and specifically facing together, and just seeing how they deal with things so differently, but at the same time, like relying so heavily on one another. It's very interesting. And we see that she actually gets down on her knee and proposes to him. There was an imaginary ring, but yeah. While we're in such a different age nowadays, in a movie, I would say that's very... And then Tim is so reluctant to even say yes. Like he pauses and is just like kind of stumbling over his words. It's very awkward. He does say yes, but it's like, oof. I also think Tim and like his dialogue with Millie is really interesting. We see a lot of kind of, I don't know, like manipulation almost bred from insecurity in this relationship. We see later that night they're in bed and he just kind of randomly throws out, "I'm sorry, I fucking suck." And they talk about splitting even. Like they just throw it out there like, well, should we? Like before we do something this big. And Millie says if we don't do it now, it'll be harder later. I mean, foreshadowing. And she says that he's been distant since something happened. And we see that he really makes her feel unsure about their love. Like, are they really in love or are they just used to one another? And she starts making a move on him, but we see him pull back and is like, I drank too much. I'm sorry. Like, very much pulling away from her. And they roll away, backs facing one another. Now, I will say it slips into a dream state. You don't really know when, but it does. And she just very blankly says, everyone knows you need me more than I need you. Resenting me doesn't make you any less of a failure. Now, this is his subconscious feeding into his insecurities, because we even see how this plays in the next morning, and he directly asks her about something she said in a dream. And she mentions something about like someone watching, and he turns and then looks at the foot of the bed and across the bed, staring back at them like it's a connected, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, the grandparents' bed. Think of that. And they see them across the bed staring at them. And this spirit rises up from like under the covers at Tim, a little like Ring-esque. And we find out it was only a nightmare. Go figure. Next scene, we see them moving in, and he slept in, of course. And she's already up, like, putting stuff away, working. And almost first thing he asks her, if she thinks he resents her. And she says, well, now. I thought this was very interesting, his subconscious pushing his own insecurities into the relationship. I also thought it was funny, like, he isn't even able to use power tools like Tim, while I think like he's kind of like puppy dog-esque, at 30-something years old, it's a bit much. And like his character is just so incapable. Like, I don't see either of them as bad. And I think that's a very interesting way to portray this relationship, is neither of them are bad. They're just bad for each other. Well, I mean, Tim's not the best character. Oh, not the best. I think it's the insecurity. It's just so loud. We see him, he smells something off and searches around and specifically notices a light right above the stairs, and he opens the top of it. Okay, great sniffer, my guy. You were able to find that real freaking fast. He pulls out a rat king. And if you don't know what a rat king is, it's when a bunch of rats get their tails like tied up and knotted. I'm pretty sure it's mostly a mythical thing, but it does happen sometimes, and it's usually caused by a dense, tightly compact area that are filled with rats, and something happens that causes them to freak out, and it just basically creates a ball, and they're knotted by their tails. It's very gruesome. It's gross. I actually did a painting related to that in college, randomly. And I thought that was such a very interesting, like this amalgamation of things in a fight or flight kind of state that leads to their further demise. And when we see him tossing it afterwards, just a long shot of him and his back facing Millie gives such a disconnected vibe. Like, you almost feel like this relationship is just miles apart. On her first day of work, Millie meets a man that's going to be the guy, Jamie, right? And he was part of the hiring committee who hired her, welcomes her in. She's excited to be in a smaller school to actually help the kids. As she's explaining like her relationship, who she's there with, just moved with, she says, me and my boy partner, Tim. Shady. And he asks if she's explored much, and she says, partners? I thought that was so like, just there's nuances, very subtle things in this that, well, I wouldn't say that was necessarily subtle, but it builds such a clear picture of the dynamic of this relationship. And I don't know as though I've ever seen a movie that dives into it this artistically, horrifically, but also accurately. Like this, she has resentment for his immaturity. And that's when they actually both find out that they are neighbors, and tells her about the woods and the trails all up behind the house. We see Tim working on music at home, and he stops once Millie comes in and asks if she can drive him to the gig. And she says that she can only bring him to the train station. He wanted her to drive him, all the ways back to New York City. I believe like a couple or a few hours out now, and he doesn't go to bed with her that night, but does ask to do the hike that she told him about. I thought it was very interesting when they're walking through the woods. You see them walking almost in sync with each other. It might have just been a coincidence, but it works. And they follow a trail and then see bells marking a path, but it's like kind of shady path. It's so nice out, they say, and then next shot, just absolutely downpouring. They get lost, unable to find their way back because no one knows how to use a compass. All of a sudden, Tim falls into a hole and is hanging onto the bell that we saw earlier, and he slips, pulling them both down in. He, of course, loses his phone in all of it, and she has no signal, so there's no calling for help. And he is more worried about his songs than even her. He's like, fuck, my phone had all my songs on it. And she's just like, I'm fine, by the way. Like, clearly, the first thought on his mind wasn't her. And they feel something is off, like, almost right away. They say that it feels crowded in the cave. Benches are stuck in the rocks up the walls. Like, we learn later what happened to this church, but how it like amalgamized itself into the earth is very strange. And Tim can't even build a fire either. He struggles, and Millie has to do it as well. They see the hole, the watering hole, and they consider drinking it. Tim brought a bottle of wine, but crawls over to drink from the water hole and fills the bottle with it. And I thought it was very interesting. Once he does take the sip, we see him from an like upside down perspective. So like the switch has been made, kind of. He's now inverted. He ends up having a lighter with him, and she asks why he brought that. And then we find out that they both quit smoking but started again behind each other's backs. I thought that was just like the little things that we get insights into this relationship. They're hiding so much from each other, even though they rely so heavily. It's so interesting. And they keep thinking about the Rat King that they found. And Tim tells a story about a smell in his room. Tim didn't notice it for a while until his dad came in and found a dead rat that was nesting above the light, slowly cooking it as he would turn on his light every day. And gradually, he didn't notice it at all. He tells us that he had forgotten about this incident with the rat in the light until the night he found them. He says the air had a smell and a taste to it. We find out that Tim's mom actually basically a psychotic break after Tim's father randomly passed away. And we find out that she had been sleeping with his corpse for however long it had been. And I thought maybe before I rewatched this movie to take these notes, I thought maybe before the cave itself could be like a representation for trauma. And I think it definitely is. But the fact that now they are like trauma bonding and they are trauma bonded by the cave, I thought was so interesting. There's a lot of trauma related to the cave specifically, and that's where we learn about a lot of it. So I don't know, it just, in this movie, the cave for me is really just symbolic of the trauma of life. And later that night, Tim is sleeping and he wakes up to an odd noise, and we see what appears to be the cave breathing at night. Like you hear it like growling and hissing as it's breathing in and out, and leaves are blowing every which way back and forth up and down the cave. And we see that the inhale and exhale actually syncs up with Tim's own breathing, and like as his chest expands, so does the rocks in the cave. And he turns to like get Millie, and he sees her just gasping for air. And I saw this as like kind of his trauma just suffocating her almost. If the cave is to represent trauma and now the cave is Tim, right? Like he's sucking all of the air out of her. They wake up the next morning and they try to get up when they notice their legs sticking together, and they pull away, but it hurts and it leaves like a rash kind of. Tim just says, oh, it must be mildew. There's a funny line later where he's like, since when do I know the first fucking thing about mildew? And their clothes are even sticking to the inside of the cave. They climb out and find their way back home. The rain had stopped. It was just too slippery and wet for them. And there's a scar essentially forming on their leg from where they pulled away. As they were just warming up, getting changed and everything back at home, she asks for a neck rub, and he's very hesitant, then seems to contemplate putting his hands like around her neck. Like you can see there's some wheels turning in his head, and you're just constantly kind of questioning like, what is this guy thinking? And he zones out, like grabbing into her and really sinking his fingers like into her shoulders, completely unaware, like zoned out that he's hurting her. And she slaps his hand. She notices that he doesn't look too good, very kind of flushed out, and she ends up going into town. He like desperately says like, oh, well, I can come. But she just says no and tells him to take a shower. Now, this was such an interesting scene. As she's leaving and he's in the shower, you see like his body being controlled almost around the shower as she takes turns in the car. Like every foot that she gets further away from him, this connection of just like wanting to be with her gets stronger and stronger. I thought this was such an incredible visual representation for this. And him just like throwing himself around essentially. Like it's such great body horror. I think it could be probably considered that. And he's even cracking the tiles with his head, causing himself to bleed as he snaps out of it, pulling himself back. We do see Tim getting evaluated by a doctor, and he seems so like dissociated, and he has panic and anxiety attacks, we learn. We see a history of mental illness in his family, but Tim says very quickly, he says it's different. So he's very unaccepting of the fact that like he has to take care of his mental health because of where his parents ended up. His doctor, therapist, I think it's just a doctor, gives him advice, but also gives him a muscle relaxer, gives him Valium, but the doctor corrects him. It's called diazepam now or something like that. Like that felt very important too. Almost like because I think we're asked a lot of the time, whose fault is it in this? And I think within the pharmaceutical industry, and specifically mental health pharmaceutical industry, I think there's a lot of times where you could ask like, well, whose fault is it for things getting worse sometimes? I think sometimes it can be medication related. So I think that's a very it's such a small thing, but it works in a way, and it made me really think about like the context of that in this film, especially with something like a muscle relaxer tends to be an abused thing, and we do see them abusing it later on. The doctor does mention the missing hikers, and this does make Tim go and look them up. Millie asks if he's feeling well enough to go on the tour, and he seems highly critical of things that are small, like social media memories. They're both just kind of like laughing about it. And that's when they hear a knock on the door, and it's the man from school that was welcoming Millie in. And he's there to welcome them into the neighborhood. And there's a lot, like even just in this little conversation that we see between the three of them, there's a lot of little jabs at Tim. Jamie even mentions like, oh, so this is your boy partner, Tim? And like, ooh. Also saying like, oh, Tim drinks anything when offering wine. And they're sitting at the table and they're talking about the cave incident. And they ask if he ever saw anything like that out there, talking about the cult type stuff with the church. And that's when we learn about a chapel that had collapsed, belonged to a new wave hippie religion. And he implies that, oh, they just moved on. I don't think that's the case. Just by that, how quickly he brushed it off, I was like, side eye, okay. But Jamie's character is very warm and welcoming, and you feel like you can really trust him. Jamie offers to pour Millie some more wine, and Tim jumps in to do it instead. Then they start ragging on each other. It seems playful at first, but then it turns into straight up bickering at one another, and you can tell like, oh, this is awkward. This is awkward in front of like another guest. And that, like, yeah, if you've ever been in the middle, it's like, oof, this is weird. And then when Jamie leaves, he shakes Tim's hand but hugs Millie. I just thought that was interesting. And Tim even says he's friendly and basically says like, oh, they must like each other. Very, very insecure. She plays into it though, and I thought this was so... I'm going to be saying interesting a lot, sorry. When she started playing into it, the fact that like, oh yeah, I am. His jealousy made him actually physically attracted to her. That is, ooh, like he only wanted what he perceives as someone else wanting. Such an interesting facet to that character. And he starts kissing her, and as it heats up, their lips stick together, and she has her eyes closed. She thinks like he bites her. He says something is off since they got there, and she says, don't give me excuses. If you don't want to fuck me, just say it. So we see that Millie has insecurities within the relationship as well. I think her attractiveness to Tim is called into question with his lack of physical attraction, it seems. You can also see that like she's insecure of the type of man that he is too. Like her insecurities with the relationship have more so to do with the actual functions, and Tim's is entirely based around her love to him. Later that night we see them sleeping and we hear cracking in the middle of the night. And then Millie feels Tim like pulling on her hair. She's telling him like, babe, roll over, you're on my hair. She turns on the light and we see that Tim is just like swallowing her hair. Like it's just hands free going down his throat and choking him. And it's pulling her in deeper. They manage to pull each other apart, but they are just terrified. The next day we see Tim pulling like hair out of his tooth. It's so nasty. He says that he's going to go for the tour, and she asks for him to stay, thinking things aren't okay. And Tim she thinks that he's crazy and is kind of like babying him. And it's very interesting how it's like Tim is so incapable, but then gets so mad that like he's babied by his girlfriend. It's like, you kind of set that system up, my guy. And she tries to be supportive of him at the station, but he's just like so removed, like insulted that she won't go with him for every second of it. She tells him, don't worry about coming back tonight, which she means in like just catch up with your friends, have a great time, see them, really get to hang out with them and spend time with them. But he takes that as like, well, you don't want me to come back? She says some space would be good and even jokes, be free. And he's waiting at the train station for the train, duh. And as she gets further and further away in the car, we see again that like power kind of coming over him. He feels himself just like losing control. So he sits down and takes the meds, trying to just like fight it. Cut to, she is at work, and we see her wrapping up class when one student stays behind. Millie asks the child, what are you drawing? Is that your dogs? And she just very coldly says, used to be. And it's the dogs that were morphing together. Tim, who walked all the ways without his stuff, and he's just like in so much pain as he's stumbling. We do see a conversation with Millie and her friend about Tim being adequate enough. So there's a voice, at least in this film, that's like reasonable, like, girl, come on. And we see that Tim doesn't really have that. She reminisces on the beginning of the relationship and isn't focusing on the present, and is like, girl, every example you bring up of why you should stay with him, it's all things like, oh, well, on the first date he did this, and all stuff in the beginning, but it hasn't been that way for such a long time. As Millie is having this conversation with her friend, she suddenly sees Tim stumbling to the school, and he's just like, I had to see you, I had to come see you. And she drags him, like, terrified, like, what the fuck are you doing here? Drags him into the bathroom, and they're in the stall, and they start having sex. At the school, the music is so almost ominous, yet feels revolutionary at the same time. I don't know if that's the right word, but it just feels so like triumphant, you know? And when it is all over, we actually see that he is now, bear with me, stuck inside of her. As they struggle, and it sounds obviously still very sexual, she notices feet standing right outside of the stall. And the feet run away. You know it's a child. And we see it pulling. We see it. You see it. So, fair warning there too. She says sorry to him, covers his mouth, and then pushes him off of her. Oh, and you can see it hurts both of them. And then her boss walks in. Dude, oh my God. The anxiety that this scene gave me, holy shit. You can see Millie's just like scared shitless in all of this. He knocks, asking if everything is okay, and she comes out scared, and he asks why she's in the boys' room. He just says next time get to the staff bathroom, and says she might want to clean up as blood trickles down her leg. Now, I would have assumed he would have been safe, or she would have been safe if what happened next didn't happen. As Jamie is leaving, you see Tim's feet coming down from the toilet. Sorry, I didn't mention that. He had perched himself up so you couldn't see his feet. And then he steps down before he fully left. Ugh! Once they get home, she is arguing with him about how foolish it was. He says it's my fault. Yeah. And then she says, you don't fuck me for months, then show up at my work. They get into a huge fight about how he gave up so much, even though she thinks he had nothing to begin with. There's lots of resentment from both of them, but still an inability to be apart. She ends up walking over to Jamie's house, who I guess is, her boss, to apologize for everything. And Tim asks if he should go. And she's just like, once she gets there, we do notice she rings a bell to announce that she's there. We don't see the bell, but she rings a bell. She apologizes and says she's very embarrassed about what happened. She gets very teary-eyed, saying that it was a stressful day. Her and Tim got into a fight, and he ends up inviting her inside. Gorgeous home. Oh my God. And they talk about the relationship, and she recognizes that they're both scared to admit things that are wrong. And she has a hard time remembering life even before Tim. And that in and of itself led to complacency. He suggests that complacency can also be harmony, mentions Plato's theory of soulmates. He suggests it's worth working for. And that really helps Millie a lot. Again, really establishing the trust with this character that we maybe shouldn't be so trustful about just yet. But if someone came talking to you about their relationship struggles, you would try to be helpful like this, right? But the mentioning of Plato's theory of soulmates, which, quick rundown, every person is born with a soulmate. And the idea of a soulmate is people were born back to back, stuck together, and Zeus split them. And so you spend your life searching for that other half. The way that this movie takes that and drives it home, oh my God. And we learn about the relationship that he had. Talks about how he considered walking away and did it for a while, but was miserable even without the fighting. And he says, I was me because of him. And as he's having this very like heartfelt, it seems, moment, she looks over and Tim is outside the window. What a jump scare that is. I don't know why. It gets me every time. He looks so fucking creepy out there. And she rushes out. She's like in such a hurry now. And Tim, outside, apologizes and says he didn't know where else to go. You were at home. And as she walks off blankly, he like kind of forces a handhold, puts his hand in hers, and she just very reluctantly, blankly staring straight forward, just reciprocates. And it's like she just accepts it. That night, Tim sees a bunch of missed calls from his friends and bandmates that he fucked over and saying like, you better be dead, dude. And he doesn't even care to respond to them. He calls up to her and walks in, seeing that she's already asleep. And he gives some manipulative, like, I'm sorry, I wish I could be what we both want. And then he closes himself in his studio, not bothering again to respond to his friends. That was just like, fucking hey. Like, I understand relationship shit, but like, don't push the ones that love you away. He hears creaking upstairs and ends up reverse searching the location of the missing couple, their last photo that they posted, and sees that it was taken in the same spot that they fell into the cave. And you even see one of the bells in the background. All of a sudden, the internet cuts out. Another great freaking jump scare, you guys. We see Millie run into the glass of the sliding doors to the studio, and you hear her rubbing against the textured glass, and she's following his steps. So I find it very interesting that like him not wanting to sleep with her had the same effect of her leaving just throughout the day to be away from him. And he steps closer, but she starts pushing harder and harder on the glass until he says fuck it and opens the door, and she falls right on top of him like convulsing, and he slaps her out of it. She asks what he is doing, and they're both just shocked. And they sit at the table trying to figure it out. Tim brings up the cave, thinking something is happening to them because of that. And also talking about how it comes specifically at night when their minds are tired and their bodies can take over. I found that to be very interesting as well. The kind of idea that like this mental health associated with their relationship also gets much worse at night. Almost like the fatigue of it really is getting to them. Brought up how they stuck together in the cave, tries to convince her, but she just walks away saying they should sleep in separate rooms, and he's like, yes, I agree. But when she tries to leave, she realizes that she can't walk away. And he's like, see, you feel it too. He says that they need answers, and he's going to go back during the day to figure it out to the cave. And she just kind of says she doesn't want him there when her parents visit. A little randomly, but I think she's viewing this whole thing, and Tim's explanations right now is very different. And I think she's afraid that like he's slipping, and she sees him as like really kind of losing it. But after she walks away, we see that the blood, there was a trickle of blood on the table from Millie, is now working its way across the table towards Tim. That night, as they are like sleeping in separate rooms, we see Tim being dragged by an invisible force towards Millie's door. And even like his insides are being pulled. It is so gross. We hear her on the other side of the door, and it opens, and you see her bend backwards and slide to him. Now, the physical acting in this is so incredible. Props to Dave Franco and Alison Brie. I didn't know y'all moved like that. Literally. It's incredible, the physical acting that these two do. I mean, it's such great body horror. They are pulled every which way, and they finally meet, and we see the pain kind of subside for a moment until they start morphing into each other. Their arms like sliding into each other's skin. It's so disturbing, dude. I've never seen it visualized like this before. It's so incredible that, like, I've always thought it's a very sinister saying, like, wanting to crawl into someone's skin. This is that. Like, oh. He tells her to grab the muscle relaxers, and she frantically reaches for them in a nearby table. And she goes, Valium? And he just utters, it's funny. There's some good humor in this movie too, but it's very lightly sprinkled. And he says, it's called diazepam now. And they start eating them off of the floor and then smashing them and snorting them all frantically. They push themselves from each other, pushing each other out. Oh, you guys. Shivers. It sends shivers through me even just thinking about it again, like the visuals in my head. Oh my God. And they eventually pass out right there on the floor. Tim comes to downstairs as Millie is tying him to a chair, and she has that saw nearby. It's a motorized electric saw. And she's just like pouring alcohol into his mouth. And now it's like she's the one kind of forcing lunacy once the relationship got this bad. It's a little bit Tim's fault that they're in this predicament. But now she accepted it for so long, she's been sucked into it too. And they look down and you see them morphing more, their arms like stuck together. That's when they decide to grab the saw and just go for it. And they go for it. It's nasty, it's bloody, it's bad. After the fact, you see them sitting across from each other, dazed and very surprisingly calm, but separated. And they realize that they only have 2 more pills to help. And she convinces them to go to the hospital, but forgot keys at the coworker's house. So she now asks him to come with, which I found interesting, and he says he'll wait this time. She tells him not to do anything stupid, but as soon as she turns around and leaves, he runs. Goes upstairs and grabs climbing rope and a flashlight, so we know he's going back to the cave. Millie walks into James's house, and now is when we notice the bell to his house has the same symbol as the bell in the caves. Tim, he's back in the cave, is now sticking to the cave itself. He's having like a hard time walking through. It's almost like a sticky trap kind of. It jumps back and forth a lot. Back at Jamie's, Millie hears music and walks towards the back of the house. While Tim is in the cave, he hears laughing. And following it, he sees faces stuck in the sides of the cave. I'm not talking Jeepers Creepers, like they're stuck to the side. They are a part of the rock. And there's also an illustration of Plato's soulmates in there as well. As Millie approaches a TV playing old tapes, which include the chapel before it sunk, we see that it's of Jamie's wedding day, where they went into the basement of the church and drank from the well, becoming one in a ritual. Jamie popping up behind her too. Total freaking jump scare. Oh my God. He tells her it's the beginning of something wonderful and is trying to persuade her that there's no escaping it once it's begun. He slices her open with his ring, like right down her veins. And as he's like going after her out of the house, his voice sounded like 2 voices. It's so eerie. Tim, back stuck to the cave, watches as this weird mutant creature crawls towards him. And it's the depiction of Plato's soulmates, just grotesque, horrific. I kind of love it. He's calling for Millie, and it's just mocking him. And we see that it's actually the lost hikers. He cuts off their fingers and frees himself and is able to climb back out. Once they're back in the driveway, they see each other and yell to stay away as they begin to just be pulled closer to each other. Tim stops fighting it and lets go, convincing Millie there's only one way to fight it. He proposes very similarly to how she did, but says that she completes him and made him realize a lot of the way he wasted her love. And this pulls her back. That, like, once things get so bad, you can tell that, like, separation is necessary, and then that person knows that too, so they come in with this big gesture. And that draws you back in. This movie is so incredible, you guys. I so recommend it. He stands up and says it won't end until one is dead. And he holds the knife to his throat. We see blood flowing from her arm into him. And as she collapses from bleeding out, she tells him to run and be free. As she dies, she asks for a favor that he will make her last post say, BRB dying, as her blood flows up into his eyes and ears, and he just holds her. Next thing we know, she comes to on the couch and says, what have you done? She's so mournful of surviving. He says it was the only way to stop the bleeding and looks down, and his hand is completely morphed around her wrist to stop the bleeding. She cries, saying she was trying to let him go. And he says, do you want to let me go? He puts on her favorite Spice Girls album. And as they dance, they undress and unwrap their wounds, declaring their love for each other. The music in the background is about two becoming one, very romantic. And they begin morphing fully together. Holy fuck, is it gross. Such incredible visuals, though. The hands pushing under their ribs and eyes even sticking together. It's truly horrific. The camera pans through the house, seeing the carnage of their relationship. And suddenly, the Wi-Fi comes back on. And it all seems back to normal. The kitchen is back to how it should be. The house is tidy and neat. A car pulls up as Millie's parents arrive, and they see the blood outside. They ring the same type of bell that was on the porch of Jamie and in the church, and we see a mix of the two answer the door. Now, I hated that. I'm gonna be so honest. That was just a little too much of like a perfect ending for me. I don't know, but it almost like cracks you up a little bit because everything was so horrific, and then it's just so neat and tidy at the end, which maybe in and of itself is a little more horrific how normalized I guess it becomes. But I don't know. I found this to be such a interesting movie, you guys. I, again, highly recommend checking it out. I don't know if I think you can stream it, but I think it's on Prime and through a subscription. But I recommend buying it. It's good. It's good, and it's one of those movies where you can really sink your teeth into it and watch it multiple times and see and learn new things as you watch it. I highly, highly recommend. Kind of like a subtle little star of the year, I guess, and honorable mentions, that's for sure. I haven't seen anyone talking about this movie, but it's really, really good. And I think it also dives deeply into complex human emotions. It feels almost similar to The Substance in a way. I found it to be very, very interesting. But I want to know your thoughts, guys. If you've seen it, definitely let me know. I want to know what you thought about this. It's crazy. But there's just something about it. Like, it works so well. And I think it's such a poignant kind of message to try to get across too, about the dynamics of these kind of toxic relationships. But yeah, let me know your thoughts, y'all. Like and subscribe. Thank you so much for listening to my ranting. If you stayed around, Gooby's off snoozing somewhere. Thank you guys so much. I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.